afternoon, everybody. We are excited to host our monthly Corfa NWRA webinar for May, and the title is Increasing Awareness and Support of the Refuge System, Update on the Fish and Wildlife Services branding work. And I'm happy to introduce Kristen Gilbert. She works in the Division of Visitor Services and Communications for the National Wildlife Refuge System. Her career interests are improving the public's user experience with America's fish, wildlife, and habitat, basically what we do on the National Wildlife Refuges. During her over 2 decades of visitor services, she has been in Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Alaska, and headquarters. She has managed visitor centers, volunteers, and collaborated with friends groups in addition to bringing innovative thinking and processes to the National Wildlife Refuge as a whole. Welcome to Kristen.
Great, thanks, Robin. And I may have met many of you, but wouldn't probably know it with just the webinar format. But very excited to be here today and give an update on some of our work over the past year. Pretty much all centered around our cooperative and philanthropic partnership with the Public Lands Alliance, which we call America's Wildlife Refuges for a lot of different reasons. And the tagline of the thing is really public focused. Refuges is places where both wildlife and people thrive in the royal we of things. So excited to talk about this partnership and some of the really fun things that we've been engaging with friends groups on, as well as some bigger things have been going on behind the scenes. So a little bit about this partnership. This was envisioned to seek a viable pathway for more support for the refuge system, essentially. So like, what does that support look like? It's our friends groups, our volunteers, but more importantly, it's lots and lots and lots of money, right? Private support, congressional support, which the National Wildlife Refuge Association and you folks work on, but really looking at that, like kind of more of a foundation type model that has been elusive for the Fish and Wildlife, or at least the refuge system, for many years. We have the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, which is more generally for fish and wildlife conservation, but the refuge really doesn't have a foundation similar to the Park Service or BLM. So how can we do this in a different way where we can draw private support to and use other innovative ways that are used in the private sector to get this partnership across? And there's 3 main ways. We know we always need to be doing public awareness, which is essentially your standard communications and marketing attempts, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the channels we're using there. What are some creative ways that we draw that private sector program support? Like, how can we really, like, what's a unique way based on the uniqueness of refuges, uniqueness of friends groups to do that? And then also, how do we continue to provide friends group support similar to Corfa and NWRA, but also just like, again, that cash infusion wherever we can get it for everyone, because we know like this collective effort is what is the community that helps advance and protect the National Wildlife Refuge System. So I'm going to talk about each of these elements and some exciting things that we're doing program-wise on some of these things. But really, it's our engagement goals in general around this partnership, and I think in general for all of our branding work, is because we're a small but mighty, a smaller even workforce today, and we have very few people and very few resources to do this work. We have this overarching thing to do quality over quantity. So like really focusing on how to make a big impact in a qualitative way at refuges. So like we can't, I think in the years past, we used to like give everybody posters. We used to try to do all these things, but what we really pivoted toward is how do we make a really big difference in a couple places or on a couple issues, and just like try to work that way based on our capacity. Within that, we also want to remain authentic to who we are, which is different from other public lands. And some of the things we're messing around with, or like that we really believe refuges are differentiates refuges, is really you have a self-guided experience on refuges, whether it's an auto tour loop or hunting or fishing or wildlife viewing or birding. Most of your experience is self-guided and out and about outdoor recreation wise. We do have some programming, EE and interpretive programming visitor centers, but it's really that self-guided discovery that makes us unique. We also have the wildlife. I'm still like, wildlife should be central to everything we do. And you'll see that in not only our programming, but also in our imagery and what we share from a brand perspective. We're also focused on making sure that refuges are safe and welcoming and encourage inquiry-based learning and personal discovery. So that self-discovery, personal discovery, and we're providing positive experiences for people, which can be really hard as we get dilapidated infrastructure and we have fewer face-to-face interactions at visitor centers, but really focusing on how we provide a positive experience. And in branding, I'm all like the national, and I think Cynthia Martinez, our chief of Refuge System, is also very focused on this. It's acting as a system, you guys might have heard her say, but it's like this consistency, right? Like we really got to come together and people need to know that when they're on a particular national wildlife refuge, it's part of a bigger system. And through our branding work, we're really trying to do this through some consistent visual identity, and then also some program packaging around some of our programming that we're excited to share with you today that might tell you that like you're on a national wildlife refuge if you go to a couple different places. And then lastly, centered on our conservation mission, everything we should do really should inspire conservation action. And we use social science and relevant interpretation, programming, and products to do that. So that's another focus of some of the messaging that we put out in the world. So as we're trying to connect with people, we look at what's called this public engagement spectrum, where you reach out to a whole bunch of people with a whole bunch of, and you're trying to get them just to pay attention to us, right? Like we're trying to move away from the 2003 centennial of America's Best Kept Secret and just reach more and more people. And in the commercial world, you usually do that with commercials and advertising. And a lot of that is outside of our reach in a lot of ways. You know, I think I've had every suggestion under the sun, from we should buy a Super Bowl ad to we should get a Thanksgiving Day parade float. And those are hundreds of thousands of dollars that we can't seem to attract. Like without a big enough constituency already, you can't attract that kind of free advertising. So part of our partnership with the Public Lands Alliance on America's Wildlife Refuges is really building this baseline of awareness and recruitment. And this is your basic, you know, and all nonprofit organizations do this. All organizations do this. Like you got your digital and social media ads, which are the advertising we can afford. Engagement on social media, visits to your website, and an e-newsletter. And you're really just trying to capture a whole bunch of people to want to convert to visiting a refuge or even just supporting a refuge. Because I have a strong opinion that there are a lot of people that already care about wildlife and don't necessarily need a visit to initiate that, but they don't necessarily associate wildlife with the wildlife refuges, and how do we put ourselves in that story? And so this is what we're doing. And we started this about 3 years ago. There's been this underlying social media advertising, virtual advertising work that's been going on. And it's been slow growing because we originally captured everybody we already had, right? Like I think in the beginning, many of you might have seen some of the ads, but the idea is to pivot away from people that already know about us to people that don't know about us. And we're slowly getting there, particularly with the talent of our communications team, which is both with PLA and on my team here at headquarters. So 7 million impressions on social media. We're growing to 27,000 social media followers. Our biggest successes have been on TikTok, and really getting at that younger demographic. We're really trying to skew 25 to 35 and figure out a way to convert those followers to going to our website, which we have around 250,000 views on that website, and then signing up for the newsletter, which has a pretty good open rate. And if you've seen it, it's kind of fun. It's not your like, Gabby, who runs a newsletter, does some great collaborations with friends groups, but also does some more fun content about guest animals and things like that. So this is all to just get people in the recruitment pipeline. But then what's exciting, we do have 69 million people that visit national wildlife refuges every year. And once they come to us, again, we're focusing on that positive experience. And that's through participation in these signature programs that I'm going to talk about. So they kind of know they're on a wildlife refuge. And also like really thinking about how we might bring some of that support into nature store sales and supporting friends groups and nature stores and how we bring that branding experience into there. It's still, we still haven't quite figured it out, but I think we're on the cusp of some things related to our animal ambassadors that we're finally excited to do. And then retention, which most of you guys on this call or all of you guys on this call, like kind of sit at this end of the spectrum. You know, you're already bought in, you're participating, you're volunteering, you're donating. And so how can we in this partnership really help you? Because you are our biggest supporters. And that's where the Friends Group support comes in and trying to raise money to help what you're doing later on. So that's kind of like the pipeline. Like we want everybody to work from awareness to Friends member and supporter. So that's how do we support all those different segments as we go along through this partnership. One of the big ways we've been doing it through the last several years, this is both an awareness and a support event. So it's awareness for new people and it's support for friends. And they're formally called the Walk for the Wild. And after a lot of feedback sessions that the Public Lands Alliance has held, we're kind of rebranding it in 2025 to help be more flexible. So like we're kind of moving away from the movement idea to more flexible activities and helping you really focus on recreation activities that excite your community. So whether it be a walk, a birding, a mentored hunt, I think it's a pretty open how you organize that. We're also extending the window of activities. So we'll kind of be promoting events from September leading up to October 8th, leading up to the end of National Wildlife Refuge Week. So like just have this extended celebration where we can fit in more events that might be occurring in the fall to promote more widely. We're also, a lot of times, like you might have a good partner, your friend's partner that has the fundraising capacity. And sometimes it's just a field station. So we're actually just making the fundraising optional this year. But it has been really, I think we've we've been experimenting with how this can be a fundraising event. And I think there will be some stations that continue to like use it as such. So it's great. It's just a great way to kind of like come together with a community of people and all do one type of fundraising event. And it increases awareness for the refuge system as a whole from that national perspective, but also gives friends an opportunity to do that. And then this is kind of related to that there will be fully led service events that might not have a friends partner as part of this year, just to kind of like have a bigger blanket wherever we have capacity, right? That's what it's all about. So if there's a friend staff that has the capacity to do it, they can do that on their own and have the same, have some of the outreach materials to promote at their site. So, and this is all about the private sector program support. So that fundraising element with here's a map of all the Find Your Wild partners or the formerly Walk for the Wild partners. So about 30 to 40 refuges have been offering that as an opportunity. But we're also doing other things. So and I'll talk about these signature interpretive programs, but essentially looking into 2025, the Public Lands Alliance has nearly $1 million out in grant requests for mainly these signature programs that we have. And they've been working really closely with Aaron LeBrake and Dan Feinberg, the new fundraising expert, have been working with stations to kind of package these grant requests for these programs. So, and again, it's like something that the refuge wanted to do as a project, and then pair that with, like a lot of people doing it so we can get more awareness of it. So that's kind of exciting, and I'm excited to see some of those things grow in 2025. So back to consistency on things. So, and this is a big part of branding, as I mentioned. And as you can see, it's coming through in our entrance signs, through internal money. We've been able, we'll probably have 400 new entrance signs out at different stations around the country. And you're seeing these more and more. They pop up on social media more, and it's super exciting to see these very unique signs that you won't see at other public lands. And so we're seeing more and more of those. They feature wildlife. They feature the refuge color blue, which is a big part of our branding. And then to pair that with what we're doing on the public awareness marketing side of things, these are some of the ads that have been running on social media for the last year. And it's around this bigger campaign called Find Your Wild. So again, features wildlife, and really trying to focus people in on that consistency and associating refuges with wildlife, and some of this connection there. So this is when we're thinking about any programming we're going to do, we're going to keep this visual identity in mind. So this is kind of where it gets to the fun programming opportunity. So once we capture people and they come to refuges or are interested in coming to a refuge, where do we position refuges in the whole world of public lands? And we really think there's a couple of different opportunities that I'll talk about, but the big one being, it's in our name, Refuge. We're uniquely positioned to meet a growing public desire for wellness, connection, and purpose. So how can we spin that like kind of more wellness, mindfulness idea? And then the other thing is we are the places where people can learn how to live with wildlife, and refuges are these places that can not only they can recharge themselves, they can figure out how to give back. And out of this, we're kind of like we have 3 signature interpretive programs in development and piloting at different ones. 2 are a little further along, like you can see from left to right. Find Your Harvest is just an idea at this point. It's not quite that far along, but there is some work going on. But a trails network promoting mental health and wellness. This idea as refuges as demonstration sites that encourage wildlife-friendly actions, and then refuges as the easiest places to learn how to hunt in partnership with the state. That one's very state-centric as our main partner versus Friends. So the first one, Nature's RX Untapped Refuges. National wildlife refuges are underutilizing their potential to address the growing mental health and wellness needs of the public. There's a missed opportunity to connect people with healing and the power of nature. And so our answer to that is our Find Your Calm trails, where people can uncover the benefits of being in nature and offers a personal escape. And there's been a pilot group of like 8 to 10 sites and friends groups and refuges that have been working on this for over a couple years, I would say. But 2 of these pilot sites are coming to fruition. They got grant funding from the Athletic Brewing Company. And they are, here are the Find Your Calm pilot sites, Balcones and Stuart B. McKinney. And then there's also some grant requests out for Find Your Calm. And so with that, we have hired a graphic designer and been working with the pilot group to come up with the interpretation for this mindfulness network trail. And this is hot off the presses from multiple things of design with the team on what we envision this looking like. There'll be like these sandwich boards to advertise the trail, let the sounds and sights of nature relieve some stress. So, and then there are these just little prompts along the trail that people can see. And so the 2 sites will be testing these out and seeing how the public and organizing some events around them and seeing how the public responds. And then this stuff will be available to any station who wants to or has the funds and capacity to put something out like this at their station. So what's exciting is we'll have the interpretive materials ready for people to order, even if you weren't part of the pilot or if you haven't pursued grants to do some of this. The next problem we're trying to address is we know, like everything we do can impact environmental health, and refuges are these unique places to inspire conservation action. And so, but we have this internal problem. Like if you guys have been with us for very long, we like to promote the conservation of species. So we'll have like World Migratory Bird Day, which we just had. We'll have Pollinator Week. We'll have Amphibian Week. We'll have Endangered Species Week. And there's a different poster and there's a different outreach package for every single thing like this. And so, and that effort kind of overwhelms everybody. Yeah, it's great to get all those things and it's nice to give things out to the public, which we want to continue to do. But how do we move away from these message-driven, these events and species-driven campaigns to something more concerted and unique to the refuge system? And that's where Be a Wild Neighbor comes in. And refuges are places where every creature from the tiniest to the biggest feels at home. Just like in your neighborhood, we're always looking for ways to make things even better for our residents. Pay attention to the wild actions you can take to be a good neighbor. And so this is like, how do we package everything that we do on refuges in a way that people can come and learn how to live with wildlife at our sites? And this originated out of a partnership with the Migratory Bird Program to reduce bird collisions. And so the current grant requests out are specific to actions related to bird collisions, but we think there's a lot of expansive ways that this can be done. And one of the first places that will be doing some of this interpretation is at NCTC. They got a grant to do some of that at NCTC. So we kind of have a demonstration site about what this might look like at different sites. And we've been working with interpreters. So we're kind of still workshopping these actions. We haven't finalized all of them, but there's about 8 or 9 actions that we can do, and some of them are very broad, from bring life to your lawn, which could mean anything from not mowing your lawn to planting native plants, all that kind of thing. So there's just these groups of things, but what's nice is that these actions can be paired with locations at refuges, whether it's your drinking fountain, whether it's your bird safe windows, whether it's your viewing platform. You can remind people that they can, here are some of the wild actions that people can take. And we envision them looking a lot. So this is some of the graphics. This is the next place we're going to start using the animal ambassadors. They'll be on the entrance sign, but now we're going to think about how to use them to kind of be the centerpiece of this wild neighbor interpretive signs. And we intend there being a couple different products with this, like some interpretive panels, but more importantly, these decal things that you see on the bottom right, which Feather Friendly makes these, and they're actually already a partner on many sites at the Fish and Wildlife Service, but they're also very involved at Public Lands Alliance. So thinking about some decals for these round decals or signs that we'll make that are similar to all the different actions. And then later we imagine like a sticker set or a magnet set that you could sell in the nature store. And then even like this sign that you could put in your yard, where as you do all the different actions, you can add stickers to it to show your neighbors that you are you are doing something like that. So kind of thinking about like the whole experience and what we could do to market this program. And here's a close-up of what our decals might look like. It's just conceptual, but like these little on-site reminders where people could write, see a quick little interpretive message, but then take action with some more details on a QR code. So, and what's exciting is, you would see different signs like this, depending on, if a station wanted to do 1 action or 5 actions, so anywhere you see it, you just kind of see this repetitive branding that will remind you that you're learning this at a national wildlife refuge, because you could go to another national wildlife refuge and learn different things. So that's kind of the idea, to bring that consistency there. This is, again, more conceptual. I think we're workshopping some of this, particularly with the bird collisions people. And I think we're going to hold some more workshops, like little sessions on what the messaging and products might be for I think the big areas we're looking at. We get a lot of requests for responsible pet stewardship and how refuges can help with that issue. But But again, I think there's wide open for a lot of participation from people on how this looks at their stations. Lastly, again, I think this is just a concept at this time, like how do we refuges are the places, the federal public lands that have the most opportunities for hunting and fishing. And we anticipate, that being another focus in the coming years. So how do we promote that with some of the great programs that we already do? John Hines and Blackwater have some great mentored hunt programs and be really these places to recruit new users to hunting. And so thinking about what that might look like from a marketing standpoint. And that's all. Linda.
Hi, Kristen. We have several comments and 3, I think, specific questions. So
6 messages.
I'm going to find the first question I saw, which was wondering how the logo depicted brings wildlife to mind. Seems very abstract. So I think that means the America's Wildlife Refuges logo.
That's a great question. And it's essentially we went back and forth on that a lot and how to depict wildlife. And we have it's usually seen next to the service shield. So the idea is that the service shield, which has a fish and a duck in it, next to the land that those animals are on. So it's kind of more in juxtaposition to the Fish and Wildlife Service logo that was envisioned, being that refuges are the public lands part of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But there was lots of discussion about that. That was the first thing that I think was developed with the partnership, and that was like 3 years ago.
Okay, great. Let's see. Next question. Will the visual guidelines be on the website for use?
The visual guidelines for these interpretive products will come. This will be filtered through your visitor services professionals. And so you need to work with your stations, your refuge manager, or anybody on staff to do some of this work. So that will be, and much of this is already available to them, except for the ambassadors. We're very picky about keeping those for specific uses. But we will be offering them to more people. And that's more just like to try to keep them as, like not overuse them initially as we're rolling some of this out.
Okay, next question, and we're getting a lot more in the chat here. So next question, will Feather Friendly provide their decals for free? Our refuge has installed the dots on visitor center windows. Would be great if we had an information decal that could be posted and viewed outside the building.
We have not approached them about any of this yet, but we have talked to them at multiple conferences. And Jennifer Owen White from the Valle de Oro, or formerly a Valle de Oro Refuge, she actually presented at a conference and with some of these things. And so this is I'm hoping that as we come together, that's part of it, is like it will be either, like we figure out how to provide those things for stations from a headquarters level, or we have partners pitching in to do it. But none of those things have really been fleshed out yet or thought about how to execute that. We're still kind of in conceptual phase. We want to make sure we get to the visitor services folks and test some of this messaging before we start printing decals.
Gotcha. And Nicole from Detroit River did answer or responded to the comment saying we have Feather Friendly on our outside windows and sell home kits in the nature store. They provided informational brochures and signage for us to give out.
So it's already free, right?
Yeah.
So we would want a partnership so it's unique to refuges, right? So that's what we would be working on. But yeah.
Okay, we've got a few more questions, and they're getting more complex as we go. Is this on an internal SharePoint site for us in refuges for staff at the service? I've not heard of these campaigns. And
these campaigns are in concept right now, and like Find Your Calm. The way we're doing all of these is a couple of pilots. And the group that's been working on the Find Your Calm trails, or the Mindfulness Network trails, have been working on them for like a group of like 10 stations, have been meeting pretty regularly to talk about how it would all work. And what we're offering is the minimum viable product. I mean, they've thought of programming, they've thought of all these things, but we're just thinking like, what is the minimum viable thing that that a station could do to be a part of this trails network? And so as we move forward and scale this, these things will become more and more available to people. So that one's probably going to be available sooner because we hot off the presses on the designs like in the last 2 days. Like, so it's still conceptual. We've just barely got the native files. The pilots will work on getting them produced for their sites, and then we'll evaluate how they're accepted, and then we'll work from there.
Okay. Next
I see Blue Goose Passport. It's out
That's
of
the
stock.
next one. Yes. And I've
Yeah,
had this question too.
that
Can it
one has
be
been
updated?
hit by an extreme lack of capacity. I've tried to pick that up the last multiple years. But we do know it's a priority, and Courtney Solom and I were talking about it and might think of a way. It kind of needs a redesign because there's not all the refuges. Last time it was printed, I think we've gained at least 10 or 15 more refuges since the last time that was printed. So we've got to rethink that all. And we are rethinking it kind of in this context of the Find Your Wild. Like, is there a way to do it that like could focus on like, I want to hit these 10 birding refuges. These are the top birding refuges I need to hit. Or where are the Find Your Calm trails that I want to do? You know, like kind of, so we're going to start a small group to talk about what that looks like. But again, it's hampered by extreme lack of capacity. Like we don't have, I think our graphics capacity in the Fish and Wildlife Service is down to like, we can barely print brochures at this point. So.
Okay, this one, I am reading this verbatim. These are not my words. The next question is, given that we are at war with the new DOI leadership and their strategy, is branding really our priority?
Public awareness will always be our priority. Like we need to have people to understand what the refuge system is and love I mean, not even understand what it is, but love the refuge system. You can just jump to loving the refuge system without really getting what it is. But I think it's more of a priority than ever to make sure that people know, new people besides us know what the refuge system is. But to your point, another part of my job is constantly providing leadership with ways to talk about this work, and they're constantly communicating it, and also with our national partners like NWRA on how to talk about this stuff with decision makers. So yes, and both.
A couple of comments. Blackwater had said they could pilot a hunt mentor program. Patuxent has a mentored hunt program. There is Friends of Oahu have been designated the charity from the sales of a brand new beer, which is very
Yeah.
exciting.
These are amazing. Like, well, in the mentored hunts, I think like everything we're doing, we're not coming up with something new, right? We already do these things, and our goal in branding and marketing is to market those, that we do those and make sure that, you know, they're getting a lot of participation. Like even the mindfulness network trail was started at Ding Darling. We're just taking an idea that came from the field and a group of people wanted to pursue, and helping it make it more consistent and provide materials for it.
Okay, got a bunch more questions. Can you elaborate on backyard refuge? Is this a concept planned for the refuge system to promote broadly?
So I hear about this in a lot of different contexts, from pollinator garden to pocket refuge to backyard refuge to schoolyard habitat to all these things. And part of our Be a Wild Neighbor interpretive theming and messaging is really thinking about, we're calling it give life to your lawn, right? We're thinking about these actions. So we're not focusing on like what the name of the program would be, but more like the action we're trying to activate in people. And I can imagine like the idea of like turning your backyard into a refuge. we can provide all the how-to on that. And that's what we're providing in the you know, the Wild Act, the be a wild neighbor kind of idea, is giving folks everything they need when they visit a refuge to take it back home. So, but I would imagine the idea is consistency, right? Let's just all call it the same thing, and we can adjudicate what we call it. I don't, but we want to think about our visitors, and we want it to be memorable as people go from refuge to refuge.
Okay. A couple questions about animal ambassadors. First, when will the ambassador species guidelines be available? There may be
Right.
opportunities for Nature Store merch to help promote the refuge. What is the timing?
Right. Tom, I know exactly what you're talking about on those mugs. And I feel like we need to get back to you on that one in particular, just because, yeah. So I think there's some opportunities to do some of that, one-offs. Again, guidelines that we would release nationally would be like, I want to look at those like merchandising opportunities as pilot projects, just like with the Find Your Calm Trail, because it's just to try out a couple things. We gotta, since we've never put it on merchandising, we don't know what it looks like. So how do we work together to make that happen? And I'll bring that up again there, and any of the PLA people on the call too. Let's try to follow up on that.
Okay, another question about animal ambassadors. We were going to ask if we could get the art for product development at our store. Guessing that's a no, since you said you want to keep them internal to not overuse, but isn't the point to get the recognition of the refuges?
I don't want to keep them internal. I want to keep them not overused. So, but I think it might, I mean, this might, with a lot of questions and a lot of interest from folks, maybe start getting together like a Nature Store products team again. I mean, we originally had one of the focus groups a couple of years ago that peripherally touched on it, but we were so far back on all the other things. But it might be worthwhile to start up that focus group team again, an advisory team of Friends members and Nature Store runners to do that. And color codes and numbers, I think we can definitely get all of you guys those on request. And I think DC Carr and our team just like did the equivalent for all the Sherwin-Williams paint colors. So yeah.
Right. Suggestion, make the Blue Goose Passport an app.
We sunk a bunch of money into that multiple times. And because of, again, that's going to take like a private, well-funded partner to do, because there's too many security requirements within the government to do said items. But we have the design of a visitor app that we could give, like, if you're really interested in that and have the time and money, we did all the scoping for the design of an app like that. But
Okay, similar question. Park Service has a wonderful app that helps visitors with maps and site information. Is there any prospect of getting a similar thing for the Refuge System? I think you just touched on that. And Aaron had mentioned increasing awareness increases support. These branding and program efforts give us the opportunity to reach out to private donors about specific opportunities to support refuges. Ultimately, we're trying to bring in more private funding and building awareness, and programs are essential to this. I just want to mention that. Okay, another question. Which of the tools for branding and marketing are currently available for use at individual refuges? And would we access them through our station ranger or through the Refuge Association or Corfa?
well, I think what we can do is, I think the ones that will be close are the Find Your Calm trail signs and the guidelines for how to start your own Find Your Calm trail. Because that was the smallest and easiest. So I think that one will be ready to scale the most quickly. In terms of the wild neighbor, we need help. Like, it's not like completely fleshed out. I think we're really close to having some bird collision products. Once we get, like we get the bird collisions group back together and they're okay with what we've decided on the interpretation. And then so piece will be ready. And then I think, as I said before, I think action-wise on this merchandising team to start thinking about like what these look like and what other products we can list. Because a lot of the stuff looks really pretty because I'm really good at putting PowerPoints together, but in some cases it might just be this PowerPoint that you see this in, right? Like some of these guidelines are just on this PowerPoint. And so this is all just like conceptual. You guys are getting this hot off the presses. And in fact, I present to the Refuge leadership team on June 10th. So you're getting it ahead of them, which can always be a risk because I know many of you talk to them, but that was it on that.
Okay. Another plug for the Mentored Hunt program at Blackwater. Have had over 200 mentees go through, been amazing ambassadors. Materials like this would really increase the reach to others. Yes, please, on Nature Store products team.
Cool.
And would be interested in helping with
Who
that.
is that? Like, I'll need to, hopefully someone's watching this.
Okay, Friends of Ridgefield.
Friends of Ridgefield. Friends of Ridgefield.
Let's see. Next up, what parts of these programs will be provided to refuges and how much needs to be initiated, paid for, and implemented by the refuges themselves? I'm afraid that with recent cuts, many or most refuges won't be able to afford to take on new projects.
Yep. And that's why we have that $775,000 out in grant asks. You know, the idea is not to ask you guys to do anything, you know, unless you already have, you know, like for example, you could just order the decal for your windows. But the idea is that concurrently with branding these programs and creating these programs, we're going out for private funding to fund these programs. So that's how we've chosen to scale it, because we know people do not have the capacity or the time to do some of this.
Okay. Next up question, can you share the presentation and a thanks for hosting this?
Yes, for sure.
Okay. Another thanks, Kristen, for your response on language. I asked because last week we planted a pollinator garden in a park in the gateway town to our refuge. We called it a pocket refuge, following other refuges lead on similar efforts in their community.
And it'd be fun to kind of look and see like how many people call it a pocket refuge, and then just choose the one that everybody calls it, right? Like already like bring everybody, like if everybody's only calling a pocket refuge, let's call it a pocket refuge. So I think some of this information that I'm sharing today too will help us formulate some of that. Because again, we don't want to change something that you guys are already doing. We just want to kind of make it a little more consistent across the system.
Next up, Walk for the Wild was once the flagship outreach program here. Has the loss of staff and funding impacted the concept? If so, how?
So I think we did a really close evaluation, and I think they had PLA had a bunch of listening sessions to hear how people were feeling about it. The stations that participate in it and use it as a fundraising opportunity have been very successful. I mean, I think upwards of $100,000 that's been raised from that program over the years, which is, again, for us is a lot of money, right? So the concept hasn't been changed. I think what we were finding is the staffing cuts, particularly to stations, we weren't seeing like you couldn't jointly do it as a team, right? Like you either had friends doing the event and usually staff couldn't participate because there was nobody to participate. So what we're trying to do is just give you more flexibility to brand whatever event you're doing as a Find Your Wild event. It'll still have the same support for the fundraising component that PLA provides, but just give more availability to try to have more, like not more events, but capture the events that already occur under the umbrella of Find Your Wild. Because then we're still debating and experimenting with just how effective events are, like as a tool to promote National Wildlife Refuge Week. I think we've learned that it's a great local engagement tool if you have a lot of people and you want to practice event planning, but we're finding the bigger Find Your Wild more effective as just an umbrella versus like one event we have. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it. And we don't want to overburden the staff or friends groups with trying to do an event.
I certainly remember people saying, friends groups saying they're interested, but they don't want it to be a fundraiser. And could they just, so this is a way to widen the,
Yep.
broaden the reach, widen the net. So a couple of folks who'd thrown their hats in the ring here, and I think Erin has put her information in there too to say if you're interested in participating, reach out to Erin. Friends of the Front Range, Friends of St. Mark's, both interested in the Nature Store products and focus team. Desiree had mentioned that the Refuge Association is using pocket refuges for their work near Loxahatchee with the Friends and the Refuge and the urban program there. Let's see, if Patuxent's Nature Store manager would also be welcomed by the Nature Store products team, I can ask if she'd participate. She owned
Totally,
and
I'm writing
operated a
these down.
successful books and gift
Yeah.
shop. Okay, another question. Did the Fish and Wildlife Service communication team get consolidated into a DOI centralized office? If so, what are the impacts to the job at hand?
I am a park ranger in the Refuge program, as is everybody on our team. So we're kind of more approaching it from an interpretive focus, but our broader public affairs office of communications team did get consolidated into the mothership. We're not sure what those impacts will mean going forward.
And I
It's
can
an
read
evolving situation as we've come to
ever evolving.
an ever evolving situation that we usually find out very last minute.
And Dan put a comment in here too. I don't know if Dan wants to jump on and just mention, I think I've read all of the questions. I think if I missed yours, please just jump on screen. And Dan as well, if you want to jump in here too.
Yeah, no, just wanted to say I really appreciated the question about the transition between Walk for the Wild and Find Your Wild. Anyone who wants to do basically exactly what they did with Walk for the Wild again, we're happy to have that be one of the opportunities. Nobody was necessarily interested in removing 5K challenges as an option. It just became very clear that a lot of stations and a lot of friends wanted to play with other options. Based on what their communities liked, the time of year that it impacted their refuge. So we're just excited to see what folks come up with.
All right. If any new questions have come up or I missed any, I think people can come off mute and on camera if they want to ask anything. If that's all right. I'll go back through the chat too to see if I missed anything.
Got Jim coming off camera. Is that on purpose? Jim, lots of people are off camera, so I don't know. I guess there's hand raising or come off mute if you want to ask something.
Well, if you do have questions for Kristen after the fact, Kristen, can we forward them to you? Maybe not one at a time, but in mass
Sure.
for answers. That'd be great.
And I think and many of you guys had questions for the Chiefs webinar last month. I don't know, many of you were on this call and I think we're in a interesting situation where we don't have Senate confirmed leadership yet. So we can't say a lot about things happening or comment on things until we understand where our new leadership is going. So
thank you. And I think we all experience that every day at our local refuges. So we're kind of getting accustomed to it, but we understand what you're saying. If there aren't any other questions, thank you so much, Kristen, for presenting the information. Thank you, PLA, Dan and Erin, for being here to answer questions also. And for all of you for participating. And the webinar the recording will be posted along with the slide deck. So you'll have access to that information on the Corfa Resource Center anytime you want it. Thank you all so much for participating, and we'll see you next month. Bye, everybody.